Hello friends. I, Gennia Nuh, project lead for the Story Project 11 by www.tellmeyourstory.biz, welcome you to the second session of this month of the Letters from Santa series. The project's Letters from Santa is addressed to parents and children. Though Santa is a mythical creation, most of us are blessed with the participation of our parents, especially the mothers in our life who look after us, take care of us, fulfill our wishes, and guide us to the right path. This project aims at providing insightful guidance and evoke interest in certain aspects of life that may shape the life of children better. Before I start this session, I would like to introduce our panelists of today's discussion, and I'm privileged to have Dr. Sharbani Banerjee Mukherjee, Sukaina Majeed, and Mansi Singh for the panel discussion titled "Books That Parents and Children Should Read Together." Now, let me begin with introducing the panelists. Dr. Sharbani Banerjee Mukherjee is an associate professor at the Postgraduate Department of English at TDB College, Raniganj, under Qazi Nazrul University, West Bengal, India. Her areas of interest include American literature, post 50s British literature, post colonial literature, partition literature, and gender studies. She is in the editorial board of many prestigious journals. She is a UGC visiting fellow of English or postgraduate courses at Department of English, Sambalpur University. She is guest professor for postgraduate courses at Dokkin Dinajpur University, Bardhaman University, Lady Brabant College, Maulana Azad College, Kolkata. Sukaina Majeed has been immersed in books since she started hanging out with her grandfather at the age of 3. Born and brought up in a house full of books, she holds strong opinions. Sukaina has been blogging and reviewing books since 2018 and now runs an unconventional book club called Read With Us to make space for all opinions and bring back the fun of reading in a reader's life again. She completed her master's in gender and women's studies while working with adolescent girls and women. Mansi Singh is a professional book reviewer and blogger. She runs a book account on Instagram for the past 3 years. She reads, writes, dances, and paints. Graduated and postgraduated as a sociology major student, she has an extrovert personality and human nature amazes her. She's observant, and her writings are inspired by mundane life. Books are a part of her, and how to say, just like food and bathing, and reading works as a therapy for her. So let's set sailing. I would pose the first question to all of you, and I would request all of you to enthusiastically participate in it. My first question of the session is: storytelling is an art that helped children bond with their elders, and it has been a practice since time immemorial. Could you remember and tell us a few instances from your childhood days about such experiences that you enjoyed? I would like to begin with Shobani ma'am on this particular question.
Thank you so much, Gennia. This is something, I think all of us, since those on the panel are way younger than me, but in my childhood, we had no media other than the radio and a gramophone record if somebody was lucky. So all that was left for us were books. And books were something that, we all of us grew up with, whether we were rich or poor or, somewhere in between. But storytelling in our generation, and I tried to penetrate that into my daughter as well, is a different genre altogether, which was why I readily accepted this invitation, because I believe that storytelling somehow, generates in a young soul and a young mind their initial identity as a human being. I remember when I was very young, when I was about 3 years old, my mother went to my mother. In those days, she was a science teacher, a rare phenomenon for women. And she went to a B.Ed college to do her B.Ed, which was, a residential college. So she left me first with my parental grandmother, and then I was taken to Jamshedpur to my maternal grandmother, who was highly educated in those days because she studied in Simla and went to school on horseback and all that. She was very smart. So I remember when I was about 4 years old, and she would sit and, she would feed me the lunch and the dinner. And like most children, I was an unwilling eater. So she would, begin to tell me stories. The interesting fact is that most grandmothers tell you the story of the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, or about fairy tales, about giants and genies and things like that. But she would tell me stories about Greek mythology. I still remember that I was about five and a half at the most. And I still remember the terrace. It was summer like this. And Jamshedpur, you can well understand, was very hot. And in those days, there were no air conditioners where we could, hide our heat. So the dinner would be taken on the open terrace that was attached to the house. And I still remember that because she told me the story of Daedalus and Icarus, of how the son, the father and son, they made wings with wax and those bird feathers. They stuck it with wax. They learned to fly, and then the father told son, "Don't fly too high, because you will fall down." And how the son did not listen to the father and tried to soar high, too near the sun, and the wax melted and he fell down and drowned in front of his eyes. And I remember my grandmother telling me that, "Shona, remember this always. Don't overleap with your ambition. You must stay on a stage that you can control." And that stuck to me so much. Years later, when she was no more, she died in 1998. I was teaching the portrait of the artist as a young man, Joyce, to my honor students, and the same story was being repeating. And I was telling them that I heard the story when I was 5 years old. I'm sure half of them didn't believe me. But what I believe is that these are such stories. And my paternal grandmother would tell me stories about Bangladesh that she had left behind, which instilled in me this lasting uh, kind of an attachment to the roots that my parents belonged to. And it took me so many years. It is only this year, this February, that I finally was able to visit Bangladesh and go to and visited the house where my father was born, and the mango tree where he would be being naughty and stealing away all the mangoes. So these are, these stories that, and I could, sort of connect with that veranda in front where they would be stealing amer achar and things like that. And I stood there and I wept after so many years, and I felt that all those stories, I used to come back from school and they were also told to me while I was being force fed with mach and bhat. And these are the stories that somehow nurtured in me, that made me grow, that made me, um, evolve as a human being. Whatever I have learnt in my life, the essence of my character, temperament we are born with, but the essence of my character, at least I would like to say 50 to 60% of it was, out of. My father would take me on his lap and he would sit and read out Rabindranath to me, short stories, poems. He would read out Jibanananda Das Bengal. He was very concerned that I was studying in a missionary institution and maybe my traditional Bengali upbringing was getting spoiled. So he would try to inject it through a syringe through my ears. But he did it so beautifully that they did enter. And when I got into teaching, I found this cross referencing between Bengali literature and English literature and other literatures added so much to the richness of our conception. So that childhood part till the teens, I would consider, up to 12, 13 years old, is a very, the children are like, a ball of sponge, that they will just soak in whatever they are being exposed to. Thank you so much, Genia.
Thank you so much. And I would like to ask you more questions about how you felt when you went back to Bangladesh and revisited the places that were just stories once upon a time, but turns out to be physical reality when you encountered them. That is a
I
really touching
I just
story.
want to add one, since you just brought up. I just want to add half a second of my observation is that when I went to Bangladesh and I went to my father's house and saw those places, and my husband was constantly taking pictures, I was so emotionally wrought up. I was not in any position to take any pictures, and he was constantly reminding me, if you cry so much, the pictures will be very bad. But then, anyway, the pictures were taken. That very night when we came back to Dhaka, I thought, why don't I document this, since my emotions are so raw? So I, wrote out a photo essay kind of a thing and posted it on my timeline in Facebook for my friends, family, everybody. They all wanted to know. And 2 nights later, the keynote speaker of a refugee seminar that I had gone to attend in Bangladesh, actually, she is from Canada. She called me up and she said, Sharbani, you did not cry. I also cried with you. And I want you to share your story just now. 2 days later, I'm having a international seminar in Canada. So I was on air in the middle of the night sharing my story. She wanted that her students should know about what I felt and what I did when I went after 75 years after my father had left that house. So I just wanted to add that since you brought up the point. Thank you.
It's, it's really touching. I don't even have remnants. I haven't read it. I just heard it, a fraction of it, and I have teary eyes. I Anyway, let's moving on to the next person, Sukaina. Please, would you like to respond to this particular question?
Thank you, Gennia. So for me, what my introduction says, I was born to families of writers, teachers, educators, and just storytellers in general. So I used to jokingly, when I was younger, I used to jokingly say that we are a family of singers and dancers. That we sing and we dance, and but actually what that singing and dancing that came is from the concept of listening to stories that my mother would tell about her paternal grandmother and her maternal grandmothers, and stories about her own mother, about how they were raised, and where they put up, and some of the of her own stories. So for me, the stories of what storytelling that I have grown up with is mostly about stories of my own family. And it has also like Bam shared about how non-eaters. I was also a non-eater, so that's how my mother, or if it was my grandfather, or if it was my father, they would like to get me to feed. They would start the oral storytelling really left an impact, because there are so many women in my family that I've heard stories about, that has left a very subconscious effect on when I turned 18. And there was the reason I have completed my masters, because I am a history graduate, is that because these women in my life who had passed away when I was born, or who were still alive, or who are not there anymore, their stories left an impact. And I was always in this this horde of this attempt to know about what is happening in the life of women. What more is can I know about their stories? What more can I uh, contribute to how their lives can be improved, how women's lives can be improved. So it's the oral storytelling about basically while I was growing up, that stories of families and story of my mother's childhood is what really helped in understanding books. And like ma'am said, with ma'am, when with ma'am it was books, for me it was also like cassettes. So we usually like there is this we have this assumption that there was no concept of audiobooks back then. But actually in my era, where when I was 7 8 years old, there used to come these cassettes which had stories in it, and they were Hindi stories and English stories. When actually that's how we started diving into the concept of books, is because of the stories that we that I read, that I listened to on the cassettes, and which made an impact of knowing more about stories, knowing more about books, irrespective of if I was whether 3 years old, 8 years old, or 10 years old. And that's also one of the reasons of me being so inclined towards reading and inclined towards making others read, is because of these storytelling. When you listen to stories, it really leaves an impact, and it really left an impact on how it shaped who I am today, and who I am as a woman, as an individual. And yeah, that really left an impact.
Thank you so much, Sukaina. Now coming to Mansi. Mansi, you are a blogger, means a book blogger and a book reviewer. So tell
Yes.
me, how does storytelling, means can you give a few instances where storytelling helped you to form a bond with your elders, with your parents?
Yes, like I live in a maternal family, a joint big family, and my maternal uncle, he is very well read, intellectual, and he used to connect everything with the mundane life. Like if we are eating potato, he used to say, "Do you know where potato came from?" And then he went to the history of potato, kaise, how. Then with the other sweet dishes that my nani used to make, he tells ki ab now you have kitchen and gas and everything, but at that time my granny used to make it on chulha and do this process that take days and days. So he used to connect everything with a history of it. So then gradually we developed a like interest in it. Like when we start eating or doing something new, we go to him and ask ki, how what's the history behind this, tell us. that that's curiosity he developed in us. Also later when we were in teenage, he used to make us read books, and then we were four cousins, and he used to make us play that part, choose a character from that story, be that character and play that part. And we just do it for fun, but he just sits on the sides and observe which child is doing the character with which audacity or with which manner, and later he gives his feedback. So I don't have like that huge a history where he connected everything, but like gaon and sheher wala thing he used to tell us very deeply and very on a broad level that we always lived in an urban area, but we have a great sense of how rural areas were used to be, or how our granny used to make things or do things or chores in household. So that's the way my storytelling developed, because we have TVs in our era. So I developed my habit for reading later in my teenage years.
That's wonderful. Now, coming to the second question of the session, the bond that is created between the parent and the child, owing to the storytelling, is a strong one. How do you think it has shaped you as an individual and as a parent now? I would like to start with Sukaina this time.
So when I turned 10, I was uh, kind of subjected to this. Had a relationship and bond with my mother, where she would start telling us about the classics that she read, the Russian classics. So back in the 60s and the 70s, there was a time when the Russian classics were translated into Urdu and Hindi. That was an initiative that was taken by the government, and public, they were bought by my grandfather to my mother, and she would tell us about the stories and how she would imagine, there was this how would she say, this world of imagining, so the power of imagination that kind of instilled in me is through her telling me stories about how Russia, she imagined, and how she read it in Hindi, because back then Russian classics, she studied in a Hindi medium school, but she knows all the Russian classics, and later on when I turned 12, 13, she told me about Ismat Choktai, Sahadat Hassan Manto. So I know about these writers since I was 13, 14 years, and I've been reading a lot of partition literature and a lot of how would you say, Urdu writers and writers who were specifically writing about social issues, and that's how and that kind of also shaped how I have strong opinions, because learning about Ismat Choktai and then learning about Sadat Hassan Manto, the way they went to jail, the entire their protest, and also knowing about how Premchand actually wrote in here Urdu. His entire story collection is actually has taken birth in Urdu and then been translated into Hindi. So she then we started reading Enid Blyton, and of course Ruskin Bond of course is there. It's part and parcel of our childhood. But Ismat Choktai Lihaf is a very strong left a very strong impact on me, and Manto's stories, of course. uh, there are stories like Holdo and yeah, so Holdo has left a very deep impact on me as a person, as a because I also have a younger sister, so that also left a impact on how stories kind of make me as a person in telling stories, and how I perceive the world as I see around, I see it around me. And then later on she would tell us about from where we come from. So my ancestors are originally farmers in UP, and then then she told us about how my grandfather wanted to study, because there was the concept of that, okay, you are the farmer, you will be a farmer next. So but he rebelled, he was like, no, I want to study. And I feel very proud whenever I tell that my grandfather rebelled against the family. And this also, I think I fall into this because I also rebelled against my parents, and I was very rebellious, and would raise my voice, would have, I still have fights with my family because of raising my voice and having there are we still have these arguments, and there are places where I say, no, this is this is not right, this is what's happening, this is not right, and she would say, no, this is right, what I'm saying is right. So this whole concept of that, if your parents are saying, was never in my house, that if your parents are saying it, oh, of course, that's the whole truth, the complete truth, and nothing but the truth. So that was never kind of the thing in my the custom, or how would you say, a tradition in my family. So the act of rebellion through my grandfather, then going on to my I have an aunt who is also a writer. She has a website where she writes small stories about her life, and So these kind of incidences and these kinds of acts in my family have really made me a person who wants to further on work on uh, letting a person speak, letting a person have a choice, because we have grown up if I talk about my generation, I have grown up, my peers have grown up in the generation where they couldn't raise their voice because they have been taught that, look, I'm your father, I'm your mother, and you have to do it according to how I'm saying it. So I want that you should listen to your child. That's something that I really admire, and I feel very lucky to be in one of those families where my mother or my father also doesn't say that no, what you're saying is absolutely wrong. And if and the concept of discussions, the concept of arguments is so kind of I don't know. It actually uh, makes you analyze the how you are as a person. Because if I had not argued, then I would never have realized later on in life. Like at 20, I had a certain thought process, but now at 32, I am a different person altogether. I know. So the evolution that happens is only because I have discussions, or I have you know uh, talk with my family. So that kind of is a relationship. So I'm not a parent but as a woman, and as a woman working with younger children now, I call them children, I call them my children, because they're really young, they're 20 years old, they're 18 years old. And so they are in my book club and they are my friends. And so I'm working with them and them, and I push them, so I push them to voice out their opinions. So uh, that's as close as children parents comes for me. But personally, I feel that that's something parents, I encourage parents in my own family as well, to let that kid have a choice. Let him be how would you say, let them tell their story. They should have a chance to have their own story.
Thank you so much, Sukaina. That was a wonderful one. Yes, storytelling is also a kind of a space where it allows or it encourages discussion among people and allows us to means exchange of discussions, formation of opinions, and that's how an individual is shaped. That's a very good one. Now, coming to Sharbani ma'am, what is your take on this particular question?
Um, just it would be, and thank you, Sukana. It was lovely to listen to your stories, and I think that is what we are made with. And I just want to tell you that you're only 3 years older to my daughter, so so here we are talking. It's good. The panel consists of people of different generations, so we can sort of share our memories and our ideas as well. My daughter is 29 years old, and a dental surgeon. So, it would be just a continuation of what I was saying. That as I was telling you, I just mentioned that my father was deeply concerned that my missionary education would, take away my identity as a Bengali. And so he would sort of make me mug up poems by Rabindranath, poems by Jivanananda. He would also do, I still believe, and I'm sure all three members of this panel here are not parents yet. They look so young, almost like my own bachas. So the best thing to grow up is to, when your parents spend time with you, give you really quality time, and not the time like, yes, do your homework and do that and the other. I remember that when I would have my holidays and my father would have a leave, he would make me walk a long stretch. Now that I go on that stretch, I realized it is almost 3 to 4 kilometers. And he would make me walk, and we would walk, and we were in a steel town, Asansol. I don't know whether you've heard about it. It is next to the Indian Iron and Steel Company, where my father was a manager there. So he would make me walk to a small little river that was quite far away. And he would tell me, here is a river. We don't know where the river is going. Let us find out. Google was not there, so he would tell me, we don't know where the river is coming from, and yet you see every droplet that is passing by has its own story to tell. And I remember I was just 5 years old. My brother was not yet born. I was in KG class, I remember, in school. And it set me thinking. I was looking deeply into all the waters, and where are they going, and what stories are they carrying away with them. So these things, this it was set me thinking. And when I couldn't walk anymore, on the return, he would take me on his shoulder. I would catch onto his hair as a kind of a guard, and he would keep talking to me, tell me stories about his childhood, about how he would be riding on his father's neck. So it was a kind of I was carrying a generational memory that he was trying to pass over to me. His he would, and as I said, that though my father was had studied science, my mother was a science teacher. In those days, books were the only kind of inspiration that anybody had. So my house was full of books. I have later discovered that pre-marriage, my parents would be gifting each other books. So those books were also there. So when I was in class 9, I was reading Moravia, Alberta Moravia, The Woman of Rome. And my mother later told me that she was asking my father, look what she's reading. That is full of sexual descriptions and all that. It will spoil her mind and you should stop it. So my father said, if I stop her reading, she will read it on the sly. She will hide and she will read it. Let her. So, as Sukaina just said, that in my house, nobody ever stopped us from reading anything. Another important thing was nobody stopped submerged our questions. Whatever question we asked, we always got a rational answer. And I would take advantage of that. When I was in class 8, I was growing up, I was getting naughtier, and we would come across certain words which I knew were very bad. But I wanted to put my father in a very uncomfortable position. I remember I told him that, what is the meaning of this new word, homosexual? And he was like taken aback, because remember, I was born in the 60s and I'm talking about the 70s, early 70s. He took a gulp, but then he told me that this is an attraction between people of the same sex. I said, how can that happen? How can they become husband and wife? So he said, maybe they don't become husband and wife, but they like to stay together because they love each other. So my concept of lesbianism and homosexuality was absolutely clear by the time I was in class 8. And I remember another instance when I was very young. My brother was born. I was about 8 or 9 years old. In our next door neighbor uh, was a newly married couple, and they had a son. I used to call her auntie, and she had a son. And everybody was saying, oh my God, the son is exactly the spitting image of the father. How wonderful. And I said, how come if the son, I saw auntie growing big and then the child. So I saw my mother, because my brother was born when I was 8 years old. So I had clear conception of the birth of a child. But then I was wondering, how come if the baby was born in the womb of the mother, how was it that the baby's face was like the father? And it set me thinking. I couldn't sleep in my afternoons and nights. And then one day I know that one person who will answer me is my father. He does not avoid any questions. So I went and asked him that, how is it? How is it that he looks like uncle, brother, the young child looks like uncle? And my father said, you've studied in biology that 23 chromosomes from the mother and 23 chromosomes for the father, they make the baby. And so maybe the father's chromosomes were stronger, so the child looks like the father. And then I went on to ask, how did the chromosomes go to auntie? And he told me that it entered her body somehow. Maybe she drank it, maybe she snorted it, or some other way. He did leave the third option open for me to realize when I would grow up and realize how I disturbed him in so many ways. So, this, what I'm trying to assert is that a child should not be made to feel a child when it is questioning, to the extent that he taught me when I would go out, when we would go on train, we had train journeys. And he asked me to spell out the names of the stations and write them down, new words. When I would go to a shop, he would ask me, spell it out. And I would spell it out. So one day I spelled out, I was taught to spell out. I spelled out SANITARI, sanitary, NAPKINS, napkins, and came and told my mother there are wonderful towels available in the shop, but Papa doesn't buy them. He buys these cheap kamchas. So these, what the ideas that are put into a child, along with that comes the reading habit. He would read out, as I told you, Sukaina was talking about Ismat Chuktai. I teach Lihaf in class, and I know how difficult it is to teach to honor students. And I'm not sure what impact it had on you when you were a young child. I teach Lihaf every semester, every odd semester. Now, even in our house, we had these collection of books, English. Majority of the books were English. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was a professor in Jamshedpur. So he had these huge collections of encyclopedias, of books, a dictionary of art. So I was introduced to Cezanne, to Van Gogh, to these artists through books. We did not have the opportunity because I would stay in a Mufassil town. We could not go to these wonderful art galleries and view them. And much later, I saw them when I went to Europe, but not in a childhood stage. But these various impacts upon the mind of a child is very important, and it is also, I'm sure we will come to that later on, of reading out books to children. That also, it subsumes inside the psyche of the child and helps it grow. Thank you. I think I could go on for 2 hours if nobody stops me, so I will stop myself.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And coming to Mansi, Mansi, what
Yes.
is your take on this question?
Okay, the first part of the question was how we connected with our parents through storytelling. So I belong to a very privileged background and I grew up in a luxurious atmosphere. But I remember my nani, my mother, and my maternal uncle lay down with us at night and tell us different stories, even fairy tales also. And gradually they moved towards Premchand. Then they moved toward Ruskin Bond, R.K. Narayan. And when the Premchand came, I asked about the author's life, like how he became author and everything. And I came to know that they wrote in very minimum, bare resources, and how writing for them was the topmost priority. Like now we have options. I want to be a writer and I am pursuing that. I am going with that. But at that time when they had like little opportunity, bare resources, and they went alone and wrote masterpieces. So it made me realize about the scarcity of life, the like in minimum also we can do something so magnificent that people in coming ages will learn about that. So gradually I developed an interest, honestly, for authors who came from a very low background or very non-privileged background, and I chose books of them because that kind of stories or pain or anything just hits or strikes right at point. So I developed my interest in literature, like high kind of literature, at around 18 or 19 years of age. And my maternal uncle used to say, as Sharbani ma'am said, "Kiri, what are you reading? Will you even get that? Like, I picked up God of Small Things." And he was like, "You are going to read that?" And when I finished it, and he like, "You liked it?" And I said, "Yes." समझ भी आया? And I said, yes. So he was amazed at first, but gradually he started giving me books. He read this about partition, about Mughals, about this and that. So that was how I connected, and I give all the credit to my uncle solely. And he used to make children sit and say, like, we choose romantic books. All, romantic genre is what attracts everyone, I guess. And at that age, 18, 19, it attracts most. But he used to say, read that like a hobby or this casually, but read this about the partition, about Hindu Muslim, and about how that person did that in history. So that he developed then. And I'm not a parent, but I am a guardian now. So the second part of question, I have a niece. She is 9, and she is my best friend. Literally, I'm not just saying that. She comes to me for every damn thing. Like, she tells me everything. And as Sharbani ma'am said, don't let that curiosity put on hold. Like, she asked from me a few months back about menstruation and about homosexuality. And I just sat quietly and I told her everything. And later, my Didi, whose daughter she is, she said, Ki, isn't that so awkward for her age? And I said, if I don't answer that, she will go and Google it. She had that privilege. She will take your phone and Google it. It's better ki I will tell her. So she and I have that bond. I just want to be that person for her, what I got from my uncle. So I'm just pushing her to do everything, like saving from this generations all the um, tam jam and everything, and just pushing her towards more reading and intellectual wala side. So she is liking that also, but it's hard, for these days kids. It's hard. I have to live with her. I don't live with her. So I try my best to be that person for her.
Thank you so much, Mansi. Now, coming to the very next session of this particular panel discussion, we are going to subject very specific questions to specific people. And I would like to begin with Dr. Sharbani once again. Ma'am, as an educator and facilitator, how can reading together help children develop skills such as language and literacy skills? And can you please recommend some books for parents and children that they should read together?
Thank you so much, Genia. Yes, as I was till now, been talking about memories and practices of our family or my near and dear ones. Coming to discuss this as, especially as a person now in my middle age, and as an teacher, and because I teach English literature, I consider myself the major storyteller in class. Because whatever we do, whichever novel, whichever short story, whichever even poem we start, we have to begin with a story to engage the attention of the students. And that is what, sort of develops a kind of an abiding interest. So, also for children, we have to actually remember 3 to 4 important avenues of nurturing the curiosity, the sense of the angst for knowledge in a child. Number one is that we have to, uh, through their reading habits, we have to nurture their imagination. They should read books that would make them imagine, that would make them, grow within their mind, the cells within their emotive faculty as a human being should enlarge after hearing one story from their parent, from their, as Mansi said, she's a Masi, or as Sukaina said, that she has this brood of young generation who look up to her for inspiration. So it is our beholden duty now to encourage them to imagine. For very, as Genia said, that if I would suggest books, first of all, you see, our storytelling begins with our grandmothers at home in the domestic venue. And what better stories than the stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata and stories of other epics, and about myths, basically myths, because myths encourage us to think. We imagine, how could Hanuman fly to Sri Lanka? How could monkeys drop stones and build a bridge on an ocean? How could somebody carry a woman by her hair and take her to? And children also, at a very tender age, they begin to question, why should brothers quarrel over property? If they don't, then the Mahabharata would not have taken place. So much of it would not have taken place. Why should the wife of a brother be brought to the court and openly humiliated and molested? So these are, why should Sita have to answer to the queries of society regarding her honesty, regarding her fortitude? So, right in the beginning, at the very, very early stage, when a child is 3, 4, 5 years old, these are the stories that are generally fed into the child. Not only that, it prods them to think, it also adds to their, growth, their moral fiber, their opinions begin to take shape. After that, we have to sort of, be very particular and think and read out to them. The most common that all of us have read in our childhood are the Aesop's fables, because the stories of the crow and the jackal and the rabbit and the mouse and the lion and the tiger and the snake, it excites a child, because a child does not see such animals apart from the crow. It does not see such animals on their day-to-day basis. And how the crow would, sort of drop pebbles in a narrow pitcher and be able to drink water from that, instills in a child, fortitude and forbearance, that if you have a will, there is a way. These are not just, idioms taught in school, but these are stories that will make them think. As we hear stories about how the fox says that the grapes are sour, that whatever we don't get, whatever we cannot achieve, we go back to criticize that. These are lessons. So stories told to them should have some kind of a didactic message. And then a little more, as they come up to maybe 8, 9 years old, they should be initiated into. Sukaina mentioned the name of my most favorite author, Enid Blyton. Even though I am in my 50s, I still love to read Enid Blyton. Give me a naughty book and I will sit with it even today. So, naughty books, a toy land where everything is made of toy, where a house, Big Ears has a house that is a mushroom, Naughty has a little toy car. So, through these, actually, these are, manipulative measures that induce, sort of seduce the child to begin reading. And reading aloud, the child reacts to the tonal changes of the mother or the father or the brother or the aunt, whoever. And according to that, the inner, consciousness of the child reacts. Not only that, it creates a deep bond. The storytelling is a creation of a deep bond between the younger generation and the older generation. I missed the second part of the previous question, and through this, I'm remembering that I began reading out to my daughter when she was only 2 years old, and I began to show her picture books, that she would be Baby's Day Out. How baby, there's a big picture with one line story, only one line on a page. Baby is going out, baby is crawling um, um, on the veranda, baby is being put in a car, the mother is taking her. So these are the things that the child grows up with. By the time my daughter was in class 2, I had introduced her to naughty books. I was reading them out to her. In 1 year's time, I saw that she was impatient enough not to wait for me anymore, and she began to read. Even in this today's techno crazy world, where we are constantly on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or this and that and the other, My daughter still reads books. She still has abiding interest in books because books are what will always remain. So, and books are what nurtures them. So, I first said that it helps a child grow. Second, that the uh, children should be taught the moral lessons of life through the stories that they read. And then the next stage would be again Enid Blyton, the five find outers and dog, the investigators, the spirit of adventure, and then hostel life that many do not get. Mallory Towers, St. Clair series is what the girls did in hostel, how they had hidden parties, how there was a bad lot amongst the good girls, and how she was taught and made to be good. So these are, all these books, after all, books are written by a human being who writes from his or her own experiences. So reading books and, you know, getting abiding interest in books actually create a kind of a habitat for the child to be ready for the hard and harsh life that they have had. And right a little bit further than Enid Blyton, I would go to classics such as Kidnapped, classics such as Partition Stories, Tobatek Singh, Lihaf. I don't. Lihaf is very difficult though, but there are other stories like Train to Pakistan. There are wonderful classics like Little Women, Kidnapped, Moby Dick. You know, classics. The Scarlet Pimpernel. I mean, I could go on. I could give a list of 100 books that a girl or a boy should read before or during the adolescent stage. And by the time the child will develop its own tastes, whether, as Mansi said, they will veer towards romantic, I still have about 80 Mills and Moons in my booty. I am very ashamed to show it to everybody, but I still do read them and get great joy out of that. My daughter refuses to read Mills and Boons. She's a Harry Potter fanatic. She loves Harry Potter, and she tells me, "Mama, please read Harry Potter." I said, "I will do one of these days." I have, and so so there are a child, as it becomes, he or she becomes 15 or 16, gradually develops his own taste, his or her, whether they like sci-fi fiction, whether they like romantic fiction, whether they like social fiction, or whether they like reality bites like novels of Coetzee, novels of Khalid Hosseini, novels that give us a picture of what the world is what about. So I think that should be left to the child to decide after he or she is well nurtured in this growing up stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, coming to the second section of the question, I would like to pose this question to Mansi. Mansi, you have means your Instagram account is full of books and books and books.
Yes,
You have read a lot of books. You have read a
yes.
variety of books, so as to say. Now, can you recommend some books that parents and children should read together, and the reason for these joint readings?
Okay, so for starters, I'm gonna highly recommend Malgudi Days by R.K. Narayan for children, because I was watching the series with my niece, and the amount of questions she posed, like some questions were like, "Oh, I didn't thought about that." The curiosity level of children, also that book was written in a very different era, so many things had changed, like a father in that, Swami's father, and how he used to be the head of the house, and what he said mother has to follow. So now children will question that because they are not seeing that around them. So Malgudi Days for starters, and for Wonder by R.G. Palacio. It's a story about a child who is born with a somewhat deformed face, and people are on first impression scared of him. And he is a small kid of 9 and 10. So he wears a helmet when he walks in school, or when he So that story is about that child's complex and how his parents, his mother especially, and father also, how they helped him, supported him to accept him as he was, not just face the word, but also accept him. And that movie is also a great adaptation, but I would recommend the book. and for teenagers, it's Perks of Being Wallflower. I know you might have heard a lot about this book, but it's the best book for teenager. Also, The Catcher in the Rye by R.D. Salinger. And these books are so good that they tell the side of teenagers in mostly the movies or shows, or when we even talk to our parents, they tell about the problems with teenagers, like hormonal changes or aggression or anything which we are going through at that time. So we are only knowing about what we are going through, but those books show us the side of, like, their teenager are the protagonist. They are telling their story. No one else is telling them that you are being hormonal or you are being aggressive or you are being violent and that. So yeah, these are my recommendations. And I think Hussaini and that will be so intense authors for teenagers. But Frederick Beckman also, his one particular book, that is Grandma Sends Her Apologies and Letters. Fantastic book. It's about a grandmother and granddaughter and how they just it's a great book. Grandmother is the icon of what a child should have in their life. She has lived a very colorful life, and she is just giving out lessons in the most fun way to her granddaughter, and she realized after her grandmother is passed. So these are the books I recommend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mansi. Now coming to Sukaina. Sukaina, you have experienced how the art of storytelling has strengthened your bond with the elders of your house. How involved were you as a child in choosing what you wanted to read or hear? Were there stories that you wanted to hear repeatedly? Please share your recommendations.
Thank you, Genia. So, in continuation of what Sharbani ma'am said about letting them choose what they want to read or how to read, I have a it's a complaint to the parents, because I was when I was growing up, I was never stopped from reading. So I have heard parents say that if they start reading fiction or they start reading storybooks, they would lose interest in studying, which is not true. I have and it's very unfortunate. So even if the child who's 7 years old, or who is 10 years old, or even is just is still in a space where they still just want to read comic books, I want to tell you that graphic novels and comics have also shaped me as a person. I used to read them. My mother, when I was a child, they used to cost just $15. So that's another story. But still, they never stopped me from reading those. There are so many. There are so naughty tales, like ma'am said. And Enid Blyton's Naughtiest Girl, as a girl, a naughtiest girl in the school, is one of the series that is loved by all. It released back in 1940. It's still going on, and it's still so popular among readers who read Enid Blyton. But yes, if the child wants to still be there, still be in within the comic books, or be in that space where, because now the graphic novels that are coming out, or the comic books that are coming out, they are not just telling us only naughty stories. If I talk in terms of contemporary times, the format of the graphic novel is also changing, and the parents need to realize that they still see it as a storybook. No, you are absolutely wrong there. You have to look at them as stories which will enhance their, as ma'am said, creative, stimulate their imagination. It will go there. We underestimate our comic books, or even small, just small books. they will also enhance the child's reading experience. So even if they are in that space, let them be. Because I feel that if we force one book on them or a certain style, they will they will not like it. Because I often joke about this with my peers, but I have more books than I have clothes. I literally have that's a story of mine, and it's a reality. I will not. I'm not making this up. My entire shelf, like on this side and this side, they're all full of books. And there are books that have gone in a certain space because there was no space in the house anymore. And then there were boxes of my nana when my nana passed away back in 2018. That's when like his books came to us. And so then we decided that okay, he has written so many books and he has such a rare collection. Let's give it to the Rekta Foundation. Then my sister grew very, yeah. So his books are there. They're online. They're scanned online. They're there. But yeah. So but then my sister is a very sensitive and a very emotional person. She was like, no, this is my nana's books. Bring them back. So we got them back, and now they are stored in a space. They are kept very with a lot of warmth and a lot of love. But because we are all, so in terms of recommendations, coming back to the question, but yes, I have actually made a list. So these are some of the books that I wanted to actually recommend for for children who are actually in that age group of I would say they start reading at 5 to 10. Is So there is a Indian novel that focuses on breaking gender stereotypes. It's called Dancing in Tata's Footsteps. It's by Srividya Venkata. Then there is one of my favorite authors. She also writes adult fiction, but she also writes, how would you say, she's written a YA novel. It's called Mirror Mirror by Antari Vajit. So it talks about body neutrality. So it's about a girl, Ananya. It's a beautiful book, and we all talk about body positivity, but I just love that Andali Vajit here has talked about body neutrality. We also need to understand that not every body relates to body positivity, and the concept of how she explains in the story the concept of body neutrality and why it's different from body positivity is something that should be read in this novel. Then there is uh, Persepolis is of course there, which talks about the Iran war. Persepolis is a beautiful book. My sister was studying for her MPhil. She started reading it, and I was very interested in that. And Persepolis is again a beautiful book. There are two volumes of it. Then there is last year, not last year, in 2021 there came a book called Once Upon an Eid. So which talks about, it's an anthology of 15 stories which talks about how Ramzan is celebrated. So Ramzan is going on right now, but it is a beautiful book of where the religion and the cultural transcends race, where you come from. In the US, it's celebrated in a different way. In India, it's celebrated in a different way. In Africa, it's celebrated in a different way. So it is a beautiful book that actually will, as a person who does not practice Ramzan or who has not seen Ramzan around them, they would enjoy those stories, those 15 stories. And they're for children. They're specifically for the age group of 9 to 11 years old. And when I read it, I cried because I have never read a book like that in my childhood. I never had the chance because the books were not written like that. But it was the 15 stories are just wonderful. They are also valuable as an audiobook, and like that's something that I think you will enjoy, because it's about kids. All of the characters are about kids. So then there is a book that I read in 2021 again. It's called Ritu Vets Chandni, where there's a girl, her Ritu Didi is getting married, but she's getting, which is written by actually Amya Narwankar. It's available in all stores actually. Ritu Vets Chandni came, so it was published in the US, but then it came to India. So Ritu Vets Chandni by Amya Narwankar. Um, so it's a girl is very happy that Ritu Didi is getting married, but she's not understanding that, and she's getting married to Chandni Didi, but she's not understanding why others are getting so upset that Ritu Didi is getting married to Chandni Didi. So it was so it's the beauty of the innocence that she's getting married. She loves Chandni Didi and she's getting married. So the concept of marriage is very clear to her, that she loves Ritu Didi, loves Chandni Didi. So why is she not? Why the people have the problem? And then there is the wonderful illustrations of how the protests. There are people protesting and the anger. The way the way they have illustrated the expressions on the faces, on the little girl's face also. I've forgotten her name, but of course, yes, those that is one another illustration that I read. So picture books, these are the picture books. And then Sudha Murthy's all books, all of them, because she also includes mythology, and she also includes grandma's short stories, and whereas she's also written adult fiction, which can also be something that you at the age of 16 or 17 can give to someone. So I'm not remembering, but Sudha Murthy has also written like these books that are about adults, for adults, like a mother, two lost brothers finding their mothers, not just not able to remember, but yeah. And there is this so people usually judge you if you read something that is a little bit about movies, but there is a certain charm of going into magic realism. So there is this graphic novel that is again a YA novel, that's that's called That Thing About Bollywood. It's written by Supriya Kalkakar, and that's also a wonderful graphic novel, which is also it's also written in prose. Um, is a wonderful book if you want your child to read on their own. You don't have to read it out to them. It's because it's so colorful, it's so beautiful, and it's just something that they will enjoy. I have so many others. I just wrote these many so that yeah, like they are rememberable for everybody. But I have read a lot of, and then there is another one, Frizzy, I read last year, which is about girls who have curly hair. It's written by a Latino author. So it tells about how to accept yourself. So it is graphic, it has illustrations, but it also has a story. And it also has this where they are brown, and it's a Latino family, and it's very popular. Frizzy is very popular. Uh, I actually forgot to write down the author's name, but yeah, how to the book focuses through the concept of curly hair, because it's a this is a common cultural problem that we have across the globe, that women with curly hair are looked down upon. They are like, oh my god, you have curly hair, or the girls themselves develop a self doubt that curly hair is not good. And so how they accept their own follies, like so the author tries to address this theme of for accepting the flaws that we have. We are usually very easily accept others flaws, but we forget to accept our own. So the self acceptance path is something that's really interesting in this graphic novel called Frizzy. So I would like to actually start, like I would actually request all the parents to to start with the graphic novels. To start, there are so many out there. There's another by Devasmita Dasgupta that's recently released. It's on Kashmir. It's about a girl. I don't remember the name of the book. I just got to know through a friend. Um, Let me see. Uh, I'll just check it out. Yeah, Terminal 3 by Devasmita Dasgupta. Yeah. So that's it's a book about a girl who's living in Kashmir, and that's also another. So they are addressing, through graphic novels, they're addressing a lot of topics. And if your child wants to stay in that space for a long time, this is a request for all the parents or who will turn into parents. Let them be there, because I trust me, there is a lot of scope. And for when I was working in a bookstore last year, I was very glad to see that there is Julia Davidson for children, as besides Peppa Pig, because Peppa Pig is overdone now. And I feel that Julia Davidson's stories is something that the children can really move on to. It's all her stories, all whatever she has written. It's been reprinted and by Pan Macmillan, actually, coincidentally. But yes, that's something that the parents who have like their children between ages of 4 to 7, uh, Julia Davidson is your go-to author. So that's from me, from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for working on this bibliography for all the kids and all the parents to refer to. That's a really rich one. Thank you so much, Sukaina. Now, coming to the last question of the session, at a time when schedules are demanding and entertainment options are way too many, how can parents make reading together a regular activity of their family's routine? I would like to begin this time with Mansi.
Thank you, Janaya. Okay, so I believe in, like, I read somewhere that children don't follow, they imitate. So if we are assuming that we are using our phone and instructing them to go and read, they won't. My niece, when she comes here on vacations, I used to sit at night for at least 1 hour with my book, and I don't even say that you have to read or anything. She just gradually, in 2 3 days, she also picked her book and sat beside me and read for whole hour. And then the next day, she was all ready in her night suit and face washed, and she was like, "Let's go, Mossy, reading time." So for them, it's like a fun activity which she is doing with her Mossy. So I told her mother also that, Didi, you should start doing that. You should also sit with the book and she will start reading. So imitating is the best thing. And how to, we have to put our phones aside with net off, on silent, and we have to put that aside as a guardian, as a parent. And don't like ki, acha ruko, I will check a message, or wait, I will attend this call, and like that. Just select a time of day. I think night is the best time. Select 1 hour, that's not enough. Select 1 hour for phone to be out from your family. Just put it aside. And when you are just involved 100% with your children, I'm sure that gradually they will tell you कि it's reading time, just go. They will tell you. You don't have to say to them. So imitating and sitting with them, and phone, yeah, putting aside phone is the best thing, because phone is the root of every problem nowadays, for even adults also, not just children. And yes, that's my solution, and I do that. I try to do that more and more and more. I don't stop children from picking up their choice of genre. Like, read, okay, like one incident with my mother. She was 15 or 16 years old, and she went to see Earth movie, which was according to her times, a very sexual and very open kind of movie. And when she came back, she asked her father, "You didn't say no to me when I was going, and it was not a movie meant for me." And he said, "You asked for it. So you already made up your mind that you have to watch it. And if I would have said no, you would be like all stubborn, and that you will give that fit of tantrum." And he said that along with telling you all the right things, I am responsible for telling you about the wrong things also. And I'm seeing nowadays parents are so obsessive about teaching the exact perfect things to their child, like, do this is the right thing. They are not allowing their child to throw a tantrum, or to even throw food, or like wear anything improper in a gathering. They are not, parents are not allowing that. They are getting angry because child are doing something. Just let it be. They are children, just let it be. So let them do the wrong things, because if they won't do the wrong things, they won't know what right things are. So we are, or generally parents which I am seeing around me, they are so controlling, so obsessive, and so comes with instruction chart that you have to behave like this in public, you have to behave like this in a gathering. Don't do that. They are children. So as a guardian or parent, I won't do that. And I would like literally expect and say people not to do that. That's my way of dealing with children. And yeah, then they will naturally get in the flow.
Thank you so much, Mansi. That was a really good message, and parents should learn from it. I do agree with that. Now, coming to Sukaina. Sukaina, what do you think? How should reading become an integral part of the family routine?
Hi, I would carry on with what Mansi said, because so my actually my suggestion is also the same, but there is a reason because why it's same. Because what happens is that when a person becomes a parent, they do not realize, or they have not studied upon it. But according to doctors, the and in pedagogy that I have studied in women in gender studies, is that the child starts noticing your behavior, your mannerisms at as early as 6 months. So if you are thinking that at 3 they are not noticing that how you are acting or how you are behaving or the mannerisms, you are absolutely wrong. They have been doing it back since they turned 6 months old. So there is a proper time period for every. There is the early toddler, then there's the toddler phase. So I would also say that, and for me, it has been my mother always was studying. So she was always reading books. Therefore, in my time, there wasn't any phone, and even if there was no scope of even the television. So even there was a phase of television being not there in our home, and there was no cable. So it was just books, and my mother telling stories. So now we have phones, we have smart TVs, smart everything, everybody's smart. But in the process of making our technology smart, we need to realize that we need to also use the technology in a smart way. Not let the smartness of this technology make us dumb. So I would also the second suggestion that I would give is that if a child is, suppose, eating, or is watching some game, out of that half time, they can the mother or whoever is feeding them, it can be a guardian, it can be anybody who is there, they can tell a story. So while eating, so because as Sharbani ma'am also mentioned earlier in the session, uh, while eating, where they're eating, they also are listening to what you are saying. So the concept of storytelling gets included in their routine life. So you don't have to kind of make them sit down and read. They can, it can be accumulated in what is already happening, just with a little bit of adjustment. Not taking out time, but actually kind of inserting the concept of storytelling, telling stories just orally. So if you start it as early as, if they are 2 years old, if you start then, that's a really smart way. But of course, what Mansi says stands true, from researchers and scientists as well, that if you are picking up your phone, they would also start, like my cousins, no, not cousins, my nieces and nephews started asking for, like, they would do this mannerism, that give it to me. So they would ask for it. So there is this, and it speaks so much, because that's how I think that's how they must have seen their mother, or seen their father, or seen their guardian asking for the phone. So what goes in my hand, my in my hand goes a book. So it's really that much of a impressionable mind. And let's not underestimate the kids, please. They are sponges, and they absorb like anything. I at 32, I realize how much of my mother is absorbed into me. And it's all happened since I have been, like, talking. And there is a little bit of my late grandfather also, so in the way I talk. And I didn't even realize it. Now I realize it, now that I'm nearing sort of 32. Now I'm realizing it, that I talk a little bit like him when I'm talking to my mother or talking to my father. So there's a little twang that comes in my when I'm talking in Hindi. So, or if I'm and in a certain, when I'm joking around, and I'm like, oh, this is how Nana used to talk. And it's so we do not realize it, but it comes into us sponges when we were kids. And yeah. So that's definitely going to be my suggestion, that include it. Like, don't make the child sit in front of the desk and read. Kind of, you have to do a little bit of a cheating, and kind of insert it without them even realizing. So, and you just have to start like that. And yeah, that would be my second suggestion, because I agree with what Mansi said. It's just, that's just like whatever you do, they are going grabbing like the sponge. So would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sukaina. Now, ma'am, Sharbani ma'am, what is your take on this particular question? How should reading become an integral activity for the family routine? Ma'am, you are on mute.
Sorry.
Thank
Am
you.
I audible now?
Yes, ma'am. Audible.
Actually, to my mind, there are three ways that we can sort of induce very cleverly, very inadvertently, the practice of reading. And most of it was said by Mansi and Sukaina themselves. That first of all is that we should read and show our kids that we enjoy that. And I completely agree that my childhood, or the time when I brought up my daughter, the mobile or the tab had not come as such an invasive influence in our private lives, to such an extent that it is like a compulsive behavioral disorder, that we cannot you know mo- emote or move or act without our cell phone for 1 minute. I can assure you that even 80% of people, they carry their mobile phones in the washroom as well. So we are so compulsively attached to it. So I strongly believe that for the parents of this generation, who are parents now and who are going to be parents now, it will be a great challenge to what Mansi said. I completely agree with her and corroborate, and I, salute her for having said that at such a young age, that we should leave the phone for 1 hour to show our kids that that hour is not a penance, but a joy, that we are enjoying this time with those books, and that we are. Secondly, is not just buying them ebooks. I personally believe, I may sound backdated and classicist and all that. I believe the smell of that new paper. I remember when my father used to get me books and I would just open and smell it, it would give me a kind of a high that no intoxicant can do for us. So, actually gifting them books. I did that with my daughter. I used to sort of induce her like a radish, like a carrot in front of the donkey. I would tell her, "Oh, you do this well, I will get you a book. If you listen to your grandmother and not be naughty, I will gift you a book after 1 month. I will count. If there are 5 accounts, you will not get a book." So the book became a kind of a product to achieve and a prize to gain out of good behavior, and then she would read that. Secondly, is right when the Sukaina said that when the child is 2, its reception power becomes very strong. I remember that my daughter I had to constantly keep saying something, otherwise, she would not eat. She was a very irritating and a frugal and unwilling eater. So I had to keep telling her stories, and then I got fed up. I began singing songs. My stories were ending, and I began songs. One day I remember, I think she was 3 years old, and not really thought about it. I was singing her, we call it in Bengali Shama Shongit, a devotional song sung to Mother Kali. And the line went like this, that mother, do listen to me. Your son is crying for you, crying out like mama bole, কাঁদে ছেলে mama bole. And I suddenly saw my daughter begin to weep and howl and cry. And the family members came rushing. Hey, you have slapped her, I'm sure. So I said, no, she's crying to a devotional music, devotional song. So she was all of 3. And what Sukaina said, I completely corroborate, that a child's receptive power is so. If you give him or her a book and you follow your mobile, the child will not imbibe that quality. So, number one, and you yourselves, the child should be surrounded with books. A happy home should be a home where there should be shelves full of books. I'm sorry we don't have time. I would have shown you. I have 2 rooms full of books. All all my money I spend on books, and thanks to Amazon now I don't even have to go to Calcutta or go to bookstores in Delhi. You can just touch your phone and your house is full and full of books. I think I have a pack of books that still I have not read, and I want to read. So books around you, they form a kind of a wall of sustenance for the child. And I missed out that point, that I'm so glad Sukaina spoke extensively on that. That is on comics and graphic novels. When we were young, we only had Mandrake and Phantom and Tintin, but those did leave a great impact. Like reading Phantom comics, we had a clear idea of what a South African seashore would be like, and how South Africa has gold there, and how there are, that colored people are also good people. Lessons in racialism, in the good racialism, that you should not be racially aware or racially constrictive in your ideas. These are the things that come. And Tintin, of course, is a master blaster. I mean, you get all sorts of knowledges. It is like a book of knowledge that gives you an idea of the Congo forest, of the Amazon, of Tibet, of Antarctica, of destination moon, of rockets and what not. So unknown to ourselves, I remember by the time my daughter was growing up, Tintins had become very expensive. And I also wanted to teach her the lesson of frugality. So what I did, I used to take her to a shop in Calcutta, in Newmarket, where there is this little store of old bookstore. And there was these, series of Tintins. I bought her lots of Tintins from the old bookstores, which were much leafed and much read. So she also, that was instilled in her that, oh, so many people had read this book before me, then this must be a good book. And she got hooked. So these are, certain things that do matter. And we as parents, and you, the those who are watching this, as parents, the first thing, in Bengali we have a saying, or in English we have, practice before you preach. We should first, show them that reading books give us joy. It should not be a chore. It should be something that should be part of the day-to-day upliftment of the soul. Only then will the child inculcate the habit. And I'm glad that Sukaina gave us a very upgraded list. There were books that I'm not aware of, and I promise you that I'm going to pursue those books. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And now we come to the end of the session. To end it on a very good note, let me just say that storytelling is actually a personal and an emotional act. And besides the stories from books, personal stories, family histories are actually a great source of knowledge. It gives us a peep into those past worlds and let us time travel and collect impressions from the sensory experience. Stories help us to reorient with our history, our culture, and help us in learning the human values that consciously and subconsciously determine our decisions and actions. That is why storytelling and reading of books should be an act that both parents and children should undertake together. It creates a space where bonds are stronger, discussions are encouraged, opinions are formed, and individuals are molded. The heat outside is scorching and blistering. TMYS encourages everyone to take care of themselves and others. Eat light, drink delicious fruit juice, stay hydrated, and read. Keep water and food for the little animals to beat the heat as well. And as well spoken by one of our panelists, a child shouldn't be made to feel like a child when it comes to question. So that's how I would absolutely on mute. Was I absolutely on
Yes.
mute?
No,
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 not
like in the end.
absolutely. Just
In the
for
end.
a second,
Yeah,
two
yeah.
seconds.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much. And other than that, let me tell me your story calls for submissions on the story prompt. Letters from Santa. Registrations are also open for the writing program season 10. We hope to hear from you. Till then, stay well, stay happy, stay together. Good night.